Hi there. Should you buy the stock of Safaricom or should you avoid it? Let's talk about that in this video. Of course, we appreciate that Safaricom is the most valuable company in East and Central Africa. I'm saying so because Safaricom has a market capitalization upwards of 1 trillion Kenya shillings. And of course, it did very amazing when it comes to its 2026 financials, because Safaricom's financial year ends 31st of March. And so the most recent reports from this year look amazing on different areas, but also there are a few areas which have gaps, as I'm going to highlight in this video. And a starting point, let's look at how the stock of Safaricom has performed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange. When you look at the stock of Safaricom, current share price is 35 shillings and 50 cents. Okay? In 1 day, it's decreased by 0.28%. In 5 days, there hasn't been any change on the stock. In 1 month, it has declined by 1.39%. Year to date, or simply put, how it's performed in that 2026, it has increased by 24.56%. And over the past 1 year, the stock of Safaricom has increased by 34.22%. So, Safaricom has gained more than 34% over the last year, okay? Is Safaricom still a good stock to buy at 35 shillings and 50 cents, or should you avoid it? Let's look at that in details. In case you are new here, my name is Afagza Sifuna. I am a finance expert and qualified accountant, bringing you amazing videos about investing and making money each and every day. In case those are topics which you like, down there is a button called subscribe. Consider subscribing to this channel so that you catch up on these amazing videos each and every day. And while you're still at it, drop a like on this video. And also, guys, have indicated my WhatsApp number down below. This here is my WhatsApp number, because a few of you reached out asking if I can provide one-to-one coaching or one-to-one guidance about your investment journey. Yes, I can. Reach out to me on WhatsApp. Let's plan how to go about that. And of course, as always, I've also attached additional resources for you, which you can go get, read, for you to be able to level up on investing. Those are also attached in the comment section. I have pinned a comment there with those additional resources. Having said that, let's look at the company snapshot, Safaricom PLC. So, Safaricom is a company which was incorporated in Kenya about 30 years ago, right? In the year 1997. And it began commercial operations in 2000. And it was listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange in 2008. Of course, its ticker symbol is SCOM, right? And its initial IPO was 5 shillings per share. So, the key milestones of Safaricom which are important for you to note is that in 1997, it was incorporated as a subsidiary of Telecom Kenya, right? And then 2000, Vodafone acquired 40% stake in Safaricom. And then commercial operations began. And then 2007, one of Safaricom's formidable products called M-PESA was launched. And then 2008, it was listed at the NSE, right? And then come there 2022, it began expanding in the region. That's when it began commercial operations in Ethiopia. So, what does Safaricom actually do to make money? Basically put, which products are there within Safaricom portfolio of products? There is mobile voice, mobile data, M-PESA, fixed connectivity, enterprise services solutions, digital services, and of course, a fully fledged business operation in Ethiopia, as it's getting its bearing and also gaining traction within that unique market that's quite different from Kenya. And then, when you look at the ownership structure, who owns Safaricom? Safaricom, 20% is owned by the government of Kenya. And that's so because government of Kenya used to own 35% up to about 1.5 months ago, when it ceded 15% to Vodafone Kenya Limited, right? Therefore, Vodafone currently owns 55% in Safaricom stake. And then the public owns 25%, right? That is the ownership structure in Safaricom. Having said that, why should you own Safaricom? Simply put, what is Safaricom's investment thesis? First and foremost, market leadership, okay? And I'm saying so because it is no brainer. Safaricom has a very dominant position in Kenya's telecom market. And of course, it also has a very large customer base, okay? Secondly, M-PESA. This is one of the company's biggest competitive advantages. Money transfer, and is deeply rooted in Kenya's economy each and every day. And then third, strong cash generation. And I'm saying so because Safaricom has very large recurring revenues and high operating margins, therefore making it an enticing business to invest in. And then fourth, it is dividends. And I'm saying so because Safaricom also has attractive dividends. Case in point, financial year 2026, dividends of Safaricom were 2 shillings per share, which is attractive looking at it in context, okay? And then fifth, it is Ethiopia. I'm saying so because Safaricom's expansion to Ethiopia was actually a very strategic business move, because this gives Safaricom another major market to tap into. I'm saying so because we are talking about Ethiopia, whose population is upwards of 100 million people. Of course, it's still early in its growth phase in Ethiopia, but then again, this is a very credible investment thesis to look at as you are looking to jump onto Safaricom's stock. Now, let's look at financials. What are the numbers when it comes to Safaricom? Starting with the group's service revenue. The group's service revenue has increased in this financial year because in 2026, group service revenue increased to 414 billion Kenya shillings, up from 371.4 billion Kenya shillings in 2025. Service revenue increased by 11.1%. And then when you look at the net income of Safaricom also increased. And I'm saying so because in the financial year 2026, it increased to 100 billion, up from 59.8 billion in financial year 2025. Therefore, Safaricom's net income increased by 67.3%. And of course, this is where Safaricom becomes particularly interesting. Profits are growing much faster than revenue, and that is an important thing. And then when you look at M-PESA, which is the main engine of Safaricom business, M-PESA revenues also increased substantially because in financial year 2026, M-PESA revenues increased to 182.7 billion Kenya shillings, up from 161 billion Kenya shillings, an increase of 13.4%. And this matters because M-PESA is now one of Safaricom's largest revenue engines. Of course, it is anchored in payments, supports merchant transactions out there, credit, savings, investment, business payments, you name it. M-PESA is more than a mobile money product. It is an ecosystem that keeps consumers inside Safaricom's financial services platform, which of course Safaricom has modeled very well to ensure consumers remain within the platform. And then when you look at data and connectivity, data revenue also increased in 2026. And I'm saying so because financial 2026 data revenue was 92.9 billion Kenya shillings, up from 78.5 billion Kenya shillings in 2025. That is an increase of 18.3%. And this growth was driven by smartphone penetration, more video consumption within the markets, more 4G and 5G usage, and of course the growing digital economy, which also needs data to propel it. And this matters because the future of telecom is increasingly about how much data consumers are consuming, not simply about how many calls clients out there are making. And Safaricom is doing very well on this. Now, let's look at Ethiopia business. How has Ethiopia business fared since Safaricom gained traction in Ethiopia in 2022? Looking at the financial year 2026, revenues from Ethiopia were 14.1 billion Kenya shillings on service revenue, up from 7.6 billion Kenya shillings in 2025. That is an increase of 86.6%. Yes, guys, a jump of 86.6%, which is very, very commendable. You should care because Ethiopia has a population which is higher compared to Kenya, and Safaricom is still at early stage there. Therefore, there's significant room for more and more subscribers in Ethiopia and also further growth within Ethiopia. Having said that, let's look at business quality, okay? Profitability, of course, as mentioned, profits 2026 hit 100 billion Kenya shillings. And beyond that, being a record profit for the company, EPS was approximately 2 shillings and 39 cents. Looking at return on equity, depending on methodology and the time from which you look at, Safaricom's return on equity ranged between 32% to 55% range. Either way, this represents a very strong return on shareholders' capital by Safaricom. And then, looking at EBITDA, right? Group's EBITDA margin was approximately 51.5%. And this demonstrates strong underlying operating economics. Safaricom has really refined its operating economics to ensure EBITDA is actually having an amazing margin. And then investing cash outflows were approximately 99.8 billion Kenya shillings. And major investments were in Kenya network, the 5G upgrading, and of course, Ethiopia expansion. Safaricom isn't just profitable on paper, it is generating substantial operating cash while still investing heavily for its future growth. So when you look at business quality, Safaricom is doing very well. And then when you look at dividends, how has Safaricom paid investors dividends in most recent years? Safaricom's dividend in the year 2026, total dividend was 2 shillings per share. And in 2025, it was 1 shilling and 20 cents per share. Therefore, the growth in dividend is 66.6%, which is an amazing growth, guys, right? And also beyond that, the dividend yield is upwards of 5.6%. And of course, out there, some investors might be wondering, is this dividend attractive? I believe it is attractive dividend, given also Safaricom has experienced an amazing share price appreciation. So you as an investor out there, you enjoy both dividends and also share price appreciation, which in case, of course, can become capital gains in case you decide to sell the stock which you are holding. Having said that, let's now look at valuation. How is Safaricom valued? The current share price is 35 shillings and 50 cents per share, okay? And of course, the financial 2026 EPS was approximately 2 shillings and 39 cents. Therefore, Safaricom's PE ratio is 14.9 times. So basically put, investors are currently paying approximately 15 times for the financial year 2026 earnings. And then when you look at dividend yield, it is approximately 5.6%, which of course is also a decent dividend yield considering the context. Please remember, Safaricom is also doing very well on the share appreciation end. What does this tell us broadly? It tells us that obviously Safaricom is not a cheap stock, okay? But it isn't necessarily excessively priced either. It is just correctly priced in the market. And of course, if you are paying any premium, you are rightfully paying premium because of market leadership, M-PESA, strong profitability, dividends, and future growth. Therefore, at almost 15 times the earnings, is Safaricom's future growth strong enough to justify the current price in the market? Okay, let's look at the future catalysts for you to really understand that, and then at the end, I'm gonna give my verdict. Looking at the future growth catalysts, of course, M-PESA is at the center of it, right? Financial ecosystem, that's amazing. Data is also doing very well. Ethiopia, with so far 13.6 million subscribers today, is bound to continue increasing in subscribers and also growth. Enterprise around cloud, connectivity, digital services is also doing very well. Therefore, on future growth catalysts, Safaricom is looking to be on the upward trend. And then let's look at risks. Which risks are Safaricom exposed to? First and foremost, Ethiopia, as big as it is an opportunity, it is also a risk. And I'm saying so because it has larger capital requirements, currency volatility, regulatory uncertainty, and of course, execution risk. So Ethiopia is partly a risk to Safaricom. Secondly, there's a risk around competition, right? Airtel continues to challenge Safaricom in the Kenyan market. And of course, just about 2 weeks ago, Airtel got a new license to operate in Kenya for a further 25 years. Therefore, the competition on that end is guaranteed to be a continuous thing for Safaricom. Third, regulation challenge. And I'm saying so because telecom taxation is a key thing. We've seen government increasing tax on different areas relating to key aspect of Safaricom business. And of course, also M-PESA regulation is also something to have an eye on, and data privacy too. And then the fourth key risk to also have in mind is capital expenditure. Network expansion is a continuous investment, and of course it is an expensive investment. Therefore, capex is also going to be quite a thing for Safaricom. And then the fifth risk is valuation, right? And I think the biggest risk for shareholders out there isn't necessarily that Safaricom is a bad or good company. It is that could you pay too much for a good company? Yes, a company could be good, but you could be paying too much. How is the Safaricom situation, right? When I put everything together, I can say overall, Safaricom is doing well in its business and even on its stock. Therefore, my verdict will be it is a mix of thinking about buying and continuing to accumulate, right? So I'd lean more towards continuing to accumulate rather than you going on an aggressive buying. So you can buy, but buy in a continuous way and also a way that is sizable. Don't take all your money and throw on the stock of Safaricom. Yes, it is a good stock, but accumulate slow but sure. That is my verdict. What do you think about Safaricom as a business, and also what do you think about the stock of Safaricom? Comment down below in the comment section. Let's continue discussing there, guys. Cheers, and you all stay safe.